Hello everyone and welcome to the part 2 of the 3-part series of handling React Forms. Now this part is basically an extension to the first part where we only had one control. We'll see how to deal with two controls. In the next part, that is the part 3, we'd be going for more controls, more form elements. So as of now, there'll be only two form elements. That will be username and password because we are going for a login form now. So let's just CMD into the part 2. Let me just create a new React app. So create React app login form. I'll call it login form, and let us just wait for this to be created. Now, one thing that I would like to have a note or maybe mention here is, like, the current form that we are going for would never be a production level form. The production level form would be coming after this, where we have multiple controls. You'd realize that in this case the state and the whole concept of handling the state remains the same, but we would be going for some if conditions and some switch cases or something like that, which would not actually be suited for a production level form. We would like to take it a notch further in the next project that we do. That is the next video. But this time around, we're just enhancing the last form that we did, which only had one form control. Well, in this case, I would like to have two form controls and see how we can deal with that whole structure. So let us wait for this project to be created, and meanwhile I'll just list out what I'm going to do in this particular case. So let me just create one file here. Let me just name it topic, and what I would like to have is simply a username, a password control, and a button, like a login button, and that'll be my login forms UI. All right, so login form controls would be these three, and obviously like we would be facing some problems. We would try to rectify it in the next session that we go for, but this is just to enhance the last form that we did that had only one control, but we'd like to have two controls and see how the data behaves now. All right, so let me just see where it is. Okay, so it will be just done in a while. Let's wait for it. And it is linking the dependencies. Yep, it's done. I would definitely like to have Bootstrap in, so I'd also do that. So let me just cd into the login form, and I would like to install Bootstrap right away. So I'd be going for yarn add Bootstrap, and I would also like to have a certain Bootstrap controls fit in. So which means I might like to install ReactJS, which is another library, but I'll just stay with Bootstrap right now. Maybe in the next form, which is the actual production level form, we'll also be installing ReactJS. So we'll just stick to Bootstrap for now. And let's just wait for this to get installed. Or also let me open up this login form inside our editor. You can see that we are not having jQuery or Popper.js installed, which is actually a dependency for Bootstrap 4. But we don't need them because most of the JavaScript is something that we would be taking care of. So we are not going for jQuery or anything like that. All right. So this works, and let me just start our project. So yarn start. So just to confirm that Bootstrap is listed in as a dependency, yes. So 4.3.1 is the version that we are going for. And let me just get ahead and delete whatever I don't need. So I do not need the app.css, so I'll be deleting that. And in the app.js, any reference to this app.css would be gone. So let me just delete that. In the app.js, I'll just take off app.css and the logo, so I don't need that logo as well. And let me just get rid of the header in here. So I'll delete the header as well. Class name would be container because that is what the Bootstrap would tell us to do. So container, I'll save it. I do need the index.css just in case if I want to override any Bootstrap CSS files. So I'll just delete the content of it. And app.test.js, I mean, I don't need this in this particular video, but I would just keep it because this is a very important file. Testing your code is really important. So this happens. I don't need the logo.svg, so I'll get rid of that. So I'll just delete it. And the rest of the files I need. So now in the index.js, I would include Bootstrap. So this is another way of including Bootstrap. So I would import the CSS. So I'll not go for this snippet, but import, I'll go for a single quotation, and I can straight away start with Bootstrap. I don't need to go into the node module / Bootstrap because node modules and index.js are practically on the same scope. So Bootstrap / dist / css / bootstrap.min.css, and I would like to have something written so that I get an idea whether the Bootstrap is kicking in or not. So let's say login. Yep, just login. Let's see how that works. If I open up my project, refresh it. Usually I don't need to refresh, but probably there are so many things going on. That's why I need to refresh. But you can see that Bootstrap has already kicked in. So in this particular case, what I would like to do is I would like to bifurcate the whole application, where I would like to have a header, a footer, and then my feature. The current feature that I have is the login component. So what I'll do is I would go for a new folder. I'll create a folder called components, in which I would go for another folder, and I'll call it shared. Oops, not share. It should be shared. So rename it. Now, why do I call it a shared folder? Because I would like to have the header and footer inside the shared folder. Because it will be shared with other features, like every other feature in an application would have header and footer. So I would like to have a folder called header. That'll be my component folder. This might contain the component file, the test file, the CSS file, and so on. As of now, I just go for header.component.js. That is just the component file in here. I'd also like to have a footer folder that would have a file which is footer.component.js. In the end, I may also go for, like, later down the line when this project develops and all, this footer may have its own CSS, it may have its own test file and on. So I'm creating a folder. Otherwise, this folder is not necessary, but it's a good practice doing so. So now inside this components, I would have my login feature. So login would just be a new file in which there will be a login.component.js. This naming convention is something that I use for describing my components. You can use your own naming convention. Just stick to it. Whatever naming convention that you use, just stick to it. Okay. Now, I'll just create functional components to start with. So header and footer would be functional component, but we know that forms would require state. So form would be my class component. So my login form would be my class component. Other than that, the header and footer would be just simply functional components. So let's create a couple of functional components. Import React from React and function header. As a custom, I would pass in props in here. If I'm not using it, I'll just return a div that would have the class, or maybe I would not return a div. I'll just return a React's fragment, because I don't want the div to be like, I don't want the div to be there because there is no requirement for the div. So I'll just go for a fragment. All right, from React. So I'll go for fragment/fragment, and I'd go for the heading that I would like to have. So the heading would be basically h1. There is no specific style for a heading in Bootstrap 4, so I'll just go for h1 to be login, and HR tag, they'll just give the horizontal ruler, and I'll export default header. All right, and I'd go for the same thing, like I'll go for the fragment and footer as well. I don't want that extra div in here, and that's why I'm going for the fragment. So import React and fragment from React. I'll go for a function footer. I'll pass in the props, and this would return a simple fragment again, slash fragment, and I'd be going for the small tag. I'd just simply have copyright symbol, let's say $copy, and I'll just put in my name. That is my footer. So export default footer would be something that I'm doing. Also, I know that login component would be a class component, so I would go for a class component. I don't need fragment in here because login component would already have that form tag to return, so I will not go for the fragment. So I'll just go for import react react, okay, and component from react, and I'd go for a class component. So class login extends component. Now I don't know what has happened to my autocomplete, so I'd have to just type in everything. So export default login. All right, and I'd have a render method. That is the minimum required method for any class component that is there. So I'll just return a paragraph for now, and that just says login works. Now this would then be converted to a form. I'll return a form instead of a paragraph, but I would just like to test out all these components. And in the app there is already a container that I have, and I would like to go for a div row. Yep, nice. The autocomplete is all over the place. Anyways, div slash div, which has a class name row. And remember, I mentioned that I'll be going for something called ReactStrap in the next video. So as of now, we'll just bear with the whole unclean, dirty code that I have. It's not readable. It will not be readable eventually because there'll be so many class names and all those tags in there. So just bear with me for that. In the next session, we'll be using a very good library called ReactStrap. But anyways, so div slash div, there'll be a class name call. And this is all the classes are from Bootstrap's library. So there is nothing involved with React in this particular case. I will be going for header in here. So I may want to import. So import header from components slash shared slash header dot component. All right. So I'll be just going for the header. Now I would have to save and see the output every time, because right now the whole autocomplete is not something that I can rely on. So let me just refresh, and the header is looking okay. I'll also go for the footer. So let me just copy this and put in the footer in here. So footer, and I'd also import footer from shared footer and footer.component. So if I refresh, you'd see that okay, the footer is also there. I would like to have an HR in the footer as well. Yeah, that looks better. And then in the middle, I'll have another row column combination in which I would have my login feature. So this feature, I would like to have it like a smaller column. So it'll be call md4. Call md4, and I would like to import login from components. Now it is right along with the shared folder, so it will be login slash login.component, and I'll include it. Okay, So login works. Now that works. Now remember, header and footer, now we don't need to actually do anything with the header and footer. Now we are just focusing only on the login component. And also remember that this is not the the actual production level code that you'd be generally going for. We would be going for something which is more of a standard code later down when we go for the registration form, because there'll be so many controls in the registration form, and we'll be organizing our code likewise. This would allow you to get more understanding on how state is maintained and how you can actually go into the direction of a production level code. So anyways, this would be a step back, like a step before the production level code that we go for. So anyways, so form/form, and we'll be going for action and method. We can have that, but we don't need to. So we'll just go for the form controls. So this will be a div/div, and we'll be going for class name form group. All right, and that would have a label/label, and we'd also go for username, and input would be ID username. So now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to keep everything the same, like username. You'd also see that I'll be assigning a name attribute in this particular input. That will also be username. I'm trying to keep it the same because later down, if you want to organize your code or if you want to create your own components, that'll be really it'll really be a good practice to have everything to be having one identifier. That'll be really good. So ID, username, and I'd also have a class name in here, which will be form control. Now remember, this would render to be an unreadable code or non-readable code right now. It'll be really dirty while we end everything, but then again, ReactJS is one thing that we would be coming across later. So ID, username, form control, that looks good. I'd also go for the password. This will be password, and the ID would be password. I'd also like to have the input type to be password as well. All right, in the class name form control, that is fine. And we'd also like to have a button. Button/button, that will be by default a submit button. Any button inside the form by default is a submit button. It'll have a class name as well of its own, btn primary, and I'd like to say login in there. So if I now check out my output, this looks decent. And then you can, like, this is just a workable, decent looking login form. You can enhance it any which way you like. This would be fine. What I would like to do in here is, like, I would still like to make it look a bit better, where I would have another class in here, like btn block, which gives you a login button like so. And then again, btn lg, a bit of a larger login button. Okay. And I would also like to align this towards the center. So which means I would like to have something like offset md 4, not 5. So if I refresh, this form should be aligned towards the center. So it's basically going for an offset and then starting from the center, almost the center. I'd also like to have the header to be aligned center. So I'd go into now there will be two choices. I can either do something in here in this particular column, but I would not like to do that. Header should be controlled by the header component itself. So I already have this, and I can add a class name, another Bootstrap class name, text center. That would align your header towards the center. If you want, you can have the footer towards the center as well, but I'd like to keep it there only. This looks okay. All right, almost okay, but we don't have anything to complain, like we have something ready made with Bootstrap. Anyway, so this seems fine, and now we'd be starting to work on the login component. And again, this would be based on what we had earlier, in the first part. So if you have not seen the first part, just go for the first part of the 3-part series. I would be starting on top of that. So I'd be straight away going for constructor props, and I'd be going for super props because we are overriding the components constructor. We'd have to send the props to the component that is the main class, and I'd be straight away going for this dot state to be the data. Now the data can be organized in a better way than I'm doing right now, but this is just the second step. So I'll be just going for as straightforward way as possible, which would be like data username to be blank and data password to be blank, plus error username to be blank and error password to be blank. So this is the next best thing that comes in my mind when I want to handle more than one controls. However, you may feel that this would actually become pretty big when the form grows, and that's true. So we try to handle that later down in a better manner when your form grows bigger. Actually, that is the part 3. However, this seems okay for now, and I would like to actually display all the state data, or data and error, everything, when the submit button is clicked. So basically I'll be creating a submit handler. So it'll be basically handle submit is a function, and we know that if there is a function like this that we create and we want to have this access the current object, that is the this operator or the this identifier or this keyword, basically we'll have to bind it with this. So basically this dot handle submit is equal to this dot handle submit dot bind this. Okay, and there is a better way to do this whole thing, but maybe we can just talk about it later when we go for the final form. Anyways, I'll just do a console.log of this dot state. So which means when I call this function, or maybe I'm not just calling it, I'm just assigning it on the on submit event handler, it'll be this dot handle submit. So remember, we are not calling this, we're just hooking it to the on submit. So it's just a hook that will be executed when the on submit happens. React calls the handle submit internally. So now if I open up my console or the developer tools and the console in here, invalid DOM property 4, and that is because similar to the class name, 4 is also a keyword, so it'll be HTML4, and that is because I didn't have the autocomplete working properly. So HTML4 is the replacement of this 4 property. That is another difference between JSX and HTML. All right, so now if I hit on login, the form submits. So we are forgetting one other thing, which is basically this, where we go for event dot prevent default. So it will hold that submit action for us. So now let me just hit this, and you can see that data username, data password, error username, everything is displayed. It's a blank thing. I would like to actually display the data username password portion. All right, so in that particular case, what I would do is I would go for inputs on key press handler, or on change handler. Actually, that'll be better. On change is what is recommended. So on change of input, I would like to get this data username thing done. So what I'll do is I would go for an on change in here, and I can go for something like this dot, let me just minimize this. I can go for something like this dot handle change. All right, and I would be able to go for a handle change function. Again, that would have the event, the synthetic JavaScript event, and I would also like to bind. So this dot handle handle change is equal to this dot handle change dot bind this. All right, so this happens, and you can approach it in several different ways. Like first, there could be 2 change handlers, like handle change for username and handle change for password. But then again, that doesn't seem pretty meaningful, because then if you have so many controls in your form, there'll be so many handle change things that you'd be doing. Instead, what I'll be doing is I'll be going for a handle change, and I'll be also assigning a name in here, like say name is equal to username. What this would do is I would be able to access this name inside the handle change method, and that way I'd be able to bifurcate whether I'm going for data username or whether I'm going for data password. So it'll be this name that would bifurcate the event that is happening. All right, let's see how. Let us also go for the name password, and on change is equal to this dot handle change. So what this would do is I can do something like this: console.log e.target.value. That'll be the current change handler inputs value, and I can also go for e.target.name. All right, and that will be basically either username or password, or if there is any third control, that controls name. So let's see what this gives us. Once again, what I have done is I have assigned a name property to be username for the username control, a name property to be password for the password control, and I have the same change handler, that is the handle change, fired in on change event. So which means this should give me the value and the name of the respective control. So let us just see. If I go for ABCD, you see that the username is the name of the control, and if I go for 1 2 3 4, you see that the password is the name of the control. So now we have the control's name. Based on the control's name, I would like to actually set the state. So I can either go for data.username, or I can go for the data.password based on the current name of the control. So what I do is, if e.target.name is equal to username, if this is the name, then I can go for something like this dot set state would go for username, data username is equal to e.target.value. All right, so this seems good, because then what happens is data username would be then set to whatever we are setting right now. We can also go for an else if, where we can go for e.target.name is equal to password. We can also do this by the switch statement, but eventually I'll not do this. You know, in the final form that we create, that is the part 3, I'd not do this, but this is just for understanding purposes. Set state, and we go for data password to be e.target.value. All right, so I'm actually successfully handling change. This will work. Like this is straightforward. This will work definitely. And let us add some username and password. Admin 123, and hit on login. You see that data.username is admin, and data.password, or not data.password, this data password is actually admin123. So this actually works. However, you actually would be able to figure out the problem in here. Like if we go for multiple controls, like 5 or 6 controls even, this handle change method would be really big, which is a problem. So we'll see what we can do with it. However, for us right now, this works, and it also gets the whole thing displayed in here, so that is fine. I would also like to show the errors if there are any. So if there is error username and error password, I would like to show the error as well. So let us try and set this error username and error password, and that would be on the click of this handle submit. So I would check whether the username, that is data username, is not blank. If it is not blank, then that is fine, but if it is blank, then an error has to be set. So what I'll be doing is, like, if this dot state dot data username, and this is actually quite big, so what I'll do is I'll do some object destructuring. So const data username comma data password is equal to this dot state. So this is called object destructuring. You can look up the whole concept in ES6. That's something that ES6 provides, a pretty handy feature. And now what I'll be doing is I'll be going for if data username is blank. I would like to set up an error, so it will be like this dot set state, and I'd be going for ERR username, like username cannot be blank. All right, and I would also like to check the same thing for data password. So if data password is blank, then we'd go for this dot set state, and we'll go for err password. Password can't or cannot be blank. All right, so no semicolon. So what this would do is, if the username is blank, it'll set that error for the username. And if the password is blank, it'll set the password error as well. Now you may wonder, like, why am I not considering the other keys inside the state? So there is one property about React that we'd like to discuss in here. Like, only if this set state is actually a merge operation. So which means whatever the state values are, they would be preserved. Apart from that, whatever the key that you give would be overridden. So it's not like the whole state would be replaced by this object, but the whole state would be merged with this object. So it's a merge operation that is being carried out. So just keep that in mind. And hence I'm not mentioning the other, other keys of the state while setting up one key. And probably the same thing. Yeah, the same thing happens here as well when we went for this handle change, and that worked, and similarly this would also work. So it is merging the object with the state object and not the replacement. All right. So if data.username is blank, then error username. If data.password is blank, then error password. We'll be setting it up. I would also like to show the data only and only if everything is valid. So I would like to have a flag here, like let valid is true. And if this is set, then what I'll do is valid is equal to false. Similarly, valid equal to false in here. And then if valid, then and only then go for the console log, let's say success, for example, and I'd go for this dot state. Right, I'm just displaying the state's value in here, which will contain everything like username, password, error username, error password, everything. All right. Also, if this is valid, I would like to reset my form. So it'll be something like this dot set state, data username is blank, data password is blank, error username again blank, and error password blank. So this could be taken into a separate method, which we would, even this validation can be a separate method. When we go for our eventual form, we'd be taking this separately. So again, this seems pretty straightforward now. Like once everything is valid, we'll just console log success and the value. Ideally, you'd be sending this to an API or something like that. And then at the end, we are just resetting the form. So this seems okay, and we would like to actually show the errors if the errors are there. So what we would do is we would like to go for a span tag, span/span, and I would like to go for something like this dot state dot error username. Or maybe if not this, then I would like to just do the object destructuring that I did earlier. That'll be better. So what I'll go for is const error username and error password is equal to this dot state. So which means I can simply go for that variable name. This is actually a good practice. Always destructure your state. ERR username here and span /span ERR password in here. So this happens, and we would like to actually see whether this works or not. So this is what we did in the previous video as well. However, we would like to modify this to use Bootstrap's error messages. So we'll try to do that. But if I just hit on login, you see that username cannot be blank, password cannot be blank. That happens. As soon as I start typing, I would like this error to go. So on the change of username, I would like this error to be blank. On the change of password, I would like this error to be blank. So I would like to do that. So I would go for this dot set state, data username is this value, and error username is blank. Similarly, data password is the value and error password is blank. So what this would do is it'll at least take that error off from my screen. So let us try that. Login. Yep, that works. And if I hit enter, you see that success and the data and error, everything comes in. I would like to, modify this as well. I don't really need data, but that's fine. As of now, we're just making it work. So this is fine with multiple controls. But you can already see that this is actually too much of code that our class function has, or our class component has, and we would like to get rid of so many things out of it. But anyways, this works. I would like to actually make use of Bootstrap's error messages rather than these span tags that I have. So what I would do is I'd give it a class name, and the class name would be invalid feedback. Again, a Bootstrap class. So which means whatever I type in here, if I give a class name invalid feedback, it would not show. All right. So you can see that it doesn't show. Even if I have an error, it would not show. Similarly, like if I, for example, hit enter or hit the submit button, you see that password cannot be blank appears while this doesn't. So if I even go for an inspect element, I don't think this, yeah, you see that this span is here, but it's not appearing. So it will only appear if I have a class in my form control and the class name is invalid. So let me just add that is invalid in here, and you can see that as soon as I add this class is invalid in my form control, this span tag appears like an error. This is what I want to have the look as. All right. So what I'll do is I would add a class on the fly. I would try to make a conditional in here, which would be basically like this would not work. So what I would like to do is class name would be form control, of course, and the form control, along with the form control, I would like to have a class called is invalid. So what I would like to do is I'd like to do something like this. Now it will be a very bigger, a very big expression, but what I'll do is err username if it is equal to blank. So which means if there is no error, then have just form control as the class, just the form control as the class, else, which means if it's not a blank, then have form control and have the is invalid as the class as well. So this is the whole expression that I'm putting in. It's a ternary operator. What I'm doing in here is class name. If error username is blank, then just go for the form control as the class name, else go for form control is invalid. So if that is the case, then what would happen is I would be able to go for something like this, and this would also go. So this works all okay. This works really well. And similarly, I would go for the same thing, same expression in here. So it will be something like this. So err password, if it is equal to blank, then it'll be form control, and it'll be form control is invalid. So the same expression there. However, you can see that this is a very big expression. We would like to shorten it out somehow, but this one is really big as an expression, but then it serves our purpose for now. And I'd also like to add an is invalid, or sorry, invalid feedback class here. So class name invalid feedback. All right. So this happens as well. So this actually it's our form working. Like if I go for some username and password, all right, you would see that the username and password would get displayed. However, on submit, on the display of this, the form is not reset. Let us see why is not that why isn't it happening. I'm going for a set state data username this. So if it is valid, we are going for success and we are doing this, but the form is not reset. And yes, there is just one reason. Like we have done a one-way binding, which means anything that is typed in inside this input gets updated inside the state via this handle change method. But the other way around, the data is not coming in the input because input has its own state. I'd go for value is equal to again, this .state.data username, that'll be really big. So what we'll be doing here is data username and data password. All right. That'll also be destructured from the state, and I can go for data username, and the value in here would be again data password. So value data password. So once I do this, I believe we would have this working. So if I go for login, username cannot be blank. I'm typing something in the username, maybe something like admin123, and hit on login. You'd see that the form is getting reset. The success is displayed in here. If I just go for admin or something like this, only the password would be giving us an error still, and whatever I type in the password, again the success message would be here. So ideally I would like to have the success parameter or this condition. In this case, I would definitely like to call an API and do something about it. But however, we don't have an API right now, or that is not even the scope of this particular video. This form really works. So if I just hit on login, keep on clicking on login, this would not actually do anything unless I enter all the form details. And also one thing here is like, either we can, disable the submit, or maybe we can disable the button or something like that if the user has not entered all the details correctly and all. So that can be a food for thought. You can try it out on your own. But this time around, though the code looks really dirty, you can see that there's so much of code in here, still the form works. We would try to rectify this. We try to make the code compact a bit in the next video that we go for, in the registration form, where we'd have so many controls, like 4 or 5 controls in there. So that would actually be the whole form that you'll be going for in the next video, the actual production level form. And we'll also be using React in there. However, this is a Bootstrap form that we have, which has 2 controls and a small enhancement, compared to the previous form that we did. And we'd be even enhancing it more in the next video. So up till then, goodbye and have a nice day.